There is a strange assumption in the modern world that people of the Middle Ages lived surrounded by filth, ignorance, and crude materials, that anything they touched must have been primitive, inefficient, or inferior. Leather, in particular, is often imagined as rough, poorly treated animal skin, stiff, smelly, and disposable. And yet, medieval Europe was literally wrapped in leather. Shoes, belts, armor, saddles, book covers, water flasks, gloves, scabbards, pouches, nearly every object that connected the human body to daily life depended on leather. Not for decoration, not for luxury, but for survival. This creates a contradiction. If medieval leather was so crude, how did it last decades, sometimes centuries? Why do museum collections still preserve medieval leather shoes with intact stitching? Why did armies trust boiled leather armor with their lives? Why did manuscripts bound in medieval leather outlast entire civilizations? Something does not add up. And so the real question emerges, quietly but relentlessly. What did medieval people understand about making and using leather that we no longer do? To answer this, we must strip away modern assumptions and step directly into the world of the medieval tanner, a profession both despised and indispensable. In medieval towns, tanners lived on the edge, literally. Their workshops were pushed downstream, beyond city walls, away from polite society. Not because their work was unimportant, but because it was powerful. Transforming raw animal skin into durable leather required processes that were slow, biological, and, above all, honest. There was no way to hide what was happening. Leather began not as a product, but as death. Fresh hides arrived stiff with blood, fat, and hair. If neglected for even a short time, they would rot. Preservation was the first challenge, and medieval people understood this with ruthless clarity. The hides were soaked in water, not clean water, but flowing water. Rivers mattered. Still water bred decay. Moving water cleansed without stagnation. Already we see a principle modern industry often ignores: time plus nature, not speed plus chemicals. Then came the most misunderstood step of all: liming. Medieval tanners soaked hides in pits filled with lime, calcium hydroxide, sometimes mixed with aged urine. This was not barbarism. It was chemistry, refined through generations of observation. The alkaline solution loosened hair follicles, broke down unwanted proteins, and prepared the skin for transformation. Hair was scraped away with curved knives, revealing the pale, swollen hide beneath. At this stage, the hide was not yet leather. It was vulnerable. Mishandled, it could be ruined forever. Here is where medieval knowledge becomes unsettlingly sophisticated. Instead of rushing forward, tanners paused. They allowed bacterial processes to do what no blade could: soften the fibers from within. This stage, known today as baiting, used fermented organic matter, often animal dung rich in enzymes. Repulsive by modern sensibilities, yes, but biologically precise. The goal was not cleanliness. The goal was control. Leather is not created by force. It is created by negotiation between collagen fibers, microbes, moisture, and time. Medieval tanners did not speak in scientific terms, but they understood outcomes. A hide overbaited became weak. Underbaited, stiff. Mastery meant balance. Only after this came tanning proper, the step that would define the leather's destiny. Contrary to popular belief, medieval Europe did not rely on a single tanning method. There were many, chosen based on climate, use, and available resources. Vegetable tanning was the most common. Oak bark, chestnut, willow, sumac, each plant offered tannins with distinct properties. The bark was crushed, soaked, and fermented into a dark, bitter liquor. Hides were submerged for months, sometimes over a year. This was patience institutionalized. The tannins bonded with collagen fibers, making them resistant to rot, water, and time. The resulting leather was firm yet flexible, capable of molding to the body. Perfect for shoes, belts, book covers, and armor. No shortcuts existed. Every step required waiting, watching, smelling, touching. The tanner's senses were his instruments. If the liquor smelled wrong, something was wrong. If the hide felt slimy instead of slick, disaster was near. Modern leather production measures success in hours. Medieval leather measured success in generations. But making leather was only half the story. Using it correctly mattered just as much. Medieval people did not treat leather as disposable. They conditioned it with animal fats, beeswax, and oils. They repaired it repeatedly. Shoes were resoled, belts were shortened and repunched. Armor was reheated and reshaped. Leather aged alongside its owner. This relationship created something modern consumers rarely experience: material intimacy. A medieval shoe was not replaced because it creased. It was cherished because it adapted. Scars were signs of service, not defects. And then there is boiled leather, cuir bouilli, a technique often misrepresented as crude hardening. In reality, it was controlled transformation. Leather was soaked, heated in water or wax, then shaped into rigid forms. The result? Lightweight armor capable of deflecting blades, decorative cases stiff enough to protect valuables, containers that held liquids without leaking. This was not guesswork. It was applied material science, refined long before laboratories existed. So why does modern leather feel different? Because modern systems do not value what medieval systems depended on. Chrome tanning, fast, cheap, uniform, dominates today. It produces soft leather quickly, but sacrifices longevity, repairability, and often health. Medieval leather could be buried for centuries and still emerge recognizable. Modern leather often cracks within years. The difference is not intelligence, it is priorities. Medieval leather was made in a world where materials were scarce, labor was embodied, and failure carried consequences. Knowledge was not written in manuals, it was written into hands, noses, and memory. And as we move forward, the question becomes uncomfortable. Was progress really progress, or just speed disguised as improvement? The Middle Ages did not lack technology. They lacked impatience. In the next part, we will follow leather beyond the workshop, into homes, battlefields, monasteries, and marketplaces, to understand how medieval society built entire systems around this material, and what happens when a culture truly understands what it touches. Leather did not exist in isolation in the medieval world. It was not a background material, quietly supporting life from the shadows. It shaped behavior, social structure, warfare, literacy, trade, and even morality. To understand medieval leather fully, we must follow it out of the tannery and into daily life, where its true intelligence reveals itself. Begin with the most intimate object of all: shoes. Medieval people walked everywhere. Roads were rough, muddy, frozen, or burning hot depending on the season. A failed shoe was not an inconvenience, it was a threat. And yet, archaeological finds show that medieval leather shoes were thin, flexible, and surprisingly ergonomic. Many were constructed using the turn shoe method, sewn inside out and then reversed, creating seams protected from abrasion. This was not accidental design, it was embodied engineering. Shoes were shaped to the foot, not the other way around. There was no concept of disposable footwear. Leather softened with use, adapting to the wearer's gait. When soles wore thin, cobblers replaced them. When uppers cracked, they were patched. Leather was expected to change. Aging was not failure, but function. Now follow leather upward, from feet to waist. Belts, pouches, and straps were the skeleton of medieval clothing systems. Without pockets, leather carried everything: coins, knives, tools, keys. These objects were handled constantly. They needed to resist sweat, friction, weather, and time. Vegetable tanned leather excelled here because it could be repeatedly conditioned and repaired. But leather also carried meaning. A belt signified status. A sword scabbard announced identity. The smell, color, and patina of leather communicated age, labor, and experience. In a world without mass uniformity, leather became personal. Two belts were never truly alike, even if they began that way. Then there is the battlefield, the place where leather's reputation is most misunderstood. Modern imagination jumps straight to metal armor, forgetting that for much of the Middle Ages, leather was not a poor substitute. It was a strategic choice. Hardened leather armor, cuir bouilli, offered flexibility where metal restricted movement. It absorbed shock. It could be shaped anatomically. It was lighter, quieter, and easier to repair. Crucially, it was accessible. Not every soldier could afford steel. Leather democratized protection, and when combined with mail or reinforced with plates, it formed composite armor systems astonishingly advanced for their time. This reveals something critical. Medieval people understood material ecosystems. Leather was not used alone, it was integrated. Wool cushioned it, linen wicking moisture beneath it, wax sealed it, fat conditioned it. Every material compensated for another's weakness. Contrast this with modern single-material solutions, and the difference becomes glaring. Leather also guarded knowledge itself. Books in the Middle Ages were not cheap. A manuscript represented months, sometimes years of labor. Its survival depended on its binding. Leather provided flexibility without tearing, protection without rigidity. It expanded and contracted with humidity better than wood alone. When properly cared for, it could last centuries. And it did. Many medieval manuscripts survive not because ink was permanent, but because leather bindings regulated moisture, absorbed shock, and could be repaired again and again. Stitching could be replaced. Covers reconditioned. The book lived. This mindset extended even to containers. Leather bottles, costrals, held water, wine, and oil. Waxed leather bags stored grain. Leather buckets fought fires. None of this was primitive improvisation. It was intentional use of a breathable, adaptable material that resisted shattering, unlike ceramics, and weighed far less than metal. So why does all of this feel alien today? Because medieval leather culture was not built on consumption. It was built on stewardship. Ownership meant responsibility. You cared for leather because replacing it was costly, not just economically, but socially. Skills mattered. Repair was respected. Waste was visible. This culture shaped trades as well. Tanners, cobblers, saddlers, armorers, bookbinders, each worked with leather differently, but all depended on shared foundational knowledge. Apprenticeships lasted years. Secrets were guarded. Mistakes were permanent. Knowledge transmission was slow but precise. And because of this slowness, systems self-corrected. Bad leather ruined reputations. Inferior tanning destroyed livelihoods. There was no scale large enough to hide failure. This stands in sharp contrast to modern industrial systems, where defects are distributed so widely they become invisible. But medieval leather culture also had limits. Environmental pressures mattered. Overharvesting bark could collapse ecosystems. Poor waste management poisoned rivers. Medieval people were not saints. They made trade-offs and sometimes suffered consequences. Yet their system forced awareness. If a river died, tanning stopped. If forests vanished, bark disappeared. Cause and effect were immediate, which leads to a difficult realization. Medieval leather was sustainable not because people were morally superior, but because their systems made irresponsibility impossible to ignore. Modern systems, by contrast, are designed to absorb consequences elsewhere. As we stand surrounded by synthetic alternatives, fast fashion, and chemically stabilized materials that cannot age gracefully, medieval leather confronts us with an uncomfortable mirror. It asks, What happens when a society forgets how materials are born, live, and die? In the final part, we will return to the present, examining what medieval leather can teach us about durability, health, repair culture, and the cost of forgetting slow knowledge in a fast world. To understand what medieval leather ultimately teaches us, we must confront the modern world it now stands against. Not as nostalgia, not as romantic reenactment, but as a diagnostic tool, a way to measure what has been lost and why that loss matters. Modern leather is everywhere, yet leather itself feels increasingly absent. Shoes crack instead of molding, bags peel instead of aging, jackets soften instantly but fall apart quietly. We are told this is progress, efficiency, consistency, affordability. But medieval leather forces a different question. If something cannot age well, was it ever truly made? The medieval relationship with leather was grounded in one radical assumption, that materials have a life cycle, and humans are responsible for every stage of it. From animal husbandry to slaughter, from tanning to use, from repair to eventual decay, leather was part of a closed loop. Nothing about it was abstract. Modern systems broke that loop. Chrome tanning reduced months to days. Petrochemical finishes replaced fats and waxes. Uniform softness replaced structural integrity. The result is leather optimized for the point of sale, not the arc of use. It looks finished the moment you buy it, and begins failing immediately after. Medieval leather, by contrast, was unfinished on purpose. Vegetable-tanned leather was stiff when new. It demanded engagement. It needed conditioning, flexing, wearing in. In return, it offered decades of service. This was not inconvenience. It was collaboration. And collaboration changes behavior. When materials respond to care, humans slow down. They notice. They learn. Medieval people knew how weather affected leather. They knew when to oil it, when to dry it slowly, when to keep it away from heat. This knowledge was not optional. Ignorance was punished by loss. Today, ignorance is absorbed by replacement. This difference reshapes culture. A society that repairs leather develops patience. A society that discards it develops appetite. Medieval leather culture trained people to see time as an ally. Modern material culture treats time as an enemy. Even health is implicated. Traditional vegetable tanning produced leather that could breathe. It absorbed moisture and released it. Shoes did not trap sweat the way sealed modern soles do. Gloves softened instead of cracking. Armor padded rather than bruised. The body was considered part of the system, not an afterthought. Modern leather, sealed in plastics and chemicals, isolates rather than integrates. We wear materials that resist us instead of responding to us. Then there is the question of toxicity. Medieval tanning was unpleasant, but its dangers were visible. Lime burned skin. Waste smelled. Rivers changed color. Harm announced itself. Modern tanning hides harm behind distance. Industrial runoff far from consumers, chemical exposure masked by finishes, labor outsourced beyond sight. Visibility creates accountability. Invisibility creates denial. This is why medieval leather feels morally confronting. It refuses to let consequences disappear. But the lesson is not that we should return wholesale to medieval life. The lesson is structural. Medieval leather systems were constrained. They could not scale infinitely. They could not ignore ecology. They could not separate production from consequence. These constraints created wisdom, not because people were better, but because systems demanded attention. Modern systems remove constraints and then wonder why care disappears. So what does it mean to reclaim medieval leather knowledge today? It does not mean rejecting technology. It means rejecting speed as the primary metric of success. It means valuing materials that improve with age. It means restoring repair literacy. It means choosing tanning methods that allow leather to fail honestly rather than collapse suddenly. It means accepting variation instead of demanding uniformity. Most of all, it means remembering that materials teach us how to live. Leather taught medieval people that durability requires patience, that strength emerges from flexibility, that maintenance is not weakness, that nothing valuable is born finished. These are not outdated lessons. They are dangerous lessons to systems built on disposability. And this is why medieval leather matters now more than ever. Not because it belongs to the past, but because it exposes the fragility of the present. We live surrounded by objects that cannot be repaired, cannot age, cannot forgive neglect. In such a world, people are trained to behave the same way, with themselves, with others, with the planet. Medieval leather offers an alternative logic, one where materials endure because humans participate, one where time deepens value instead of destroying it, one where making something means accepting responsibility for its future. Progress is not defined by how fast we produce. It is defined by how long things remain worthy of care. And by that measure, the Middle Ages may not be behind us at all, but waiting, quietly, for us to catch up.